Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving into a really sensitive situation today involving marriage and specifically this second nikah that your wife entered into with Amu Ali and Ibrahim Hamid. And yeah, it's a complicated one for sure. So what we're hoping to do today is really just unpack it,
Yeah.
try to pull out the Islamist legal issues and ethical concerns, help you understand it all clearly.
Yeah, definitely. It's a lot to process.
For sure.
So we'll be looking at why that second nikah isn't valid in Islamic law, what the responsibilities are for those who helped it happen, and that whole idea of accountability in the community.
And of course, we want to address how all of this has affected you personally.
Right, because it's not just about the legal stuff, it's about the impact on your life. And then, stepping back, we'll look at what this whole situation means more broadly, for the Muslim community.
Okay, sounds good. So to start, we've got this absolute prohibition of polyandry in Islam.
Exactly.
Like a woman can't have multiple husbands.
Right. That's fundamental. And our sources highlight this really clearly. Like Surah An-Nisa 4.24, it says a married woman just cannot remarry as long as that first marriage is still in place.
Got it. So because your marriage was still valid, the second one with Amu Ali and Ibrahim Hamide is just completely void. Like it never happened.
Exactly. It's considered batil, invalid from the very beginning.
Okay. So it's not just like an error or something. It's just completely against what Islam allows.
Yeah, yeah. And this prohibition isn't random, It comes from the need to have clear lineage, a stable family structure. Those things are really important. And just to clarify, since it's invalid, you wouldn't even need a divorce to nullify it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So then that brings us to Amu Ali and Ibrahim Hamide. They were the ones who facilitated this second nikah.
Right, right. And that makes their role really critical here.
Yeah, their involvement is a big deal because they knew about your existing marriage, right?
Exactly. That's where the ethical concern comes in. We have Surah Al-Ma'idah 5.2. It tells us to cooperate in righteousness and piety, but, to never cooperate in sin. And that's what makes this so problematic. They knew your marriage was valid, and they still went ahead and helped with the second nikah. It's like directly going against what's allowed.
Right. It's almost like they were enabling something that's clearly against Islamic law.
Exactly. As facilitators, they had this huge responsibility to make sure this nikah was actually valid. They didn't do that, and that's a serious breach of trust, and it really undermines, the sanctity of your existing marriage.
Absolutely. So it sounds like accountability is just this huge theme here.
It is. It's so central to Islam. Like we have Surah An-Nisa 4.58. It says to render trust to whom they are due and to judge between people with justice. And this whole thing with the invalid nikah, it's a major betrayal of amania. That concept of trust. It's the duty to protect the integrity of marriage contracts and everything. And the thing is, the responsibility here, it lies with those who facilitated it, not just with you.
That makes sense.
And there's another layer to this. You mentioned that there might have been false claims of divorce made. So that raises the issue of qadhf, which is slander, a serious offense in Islam. Surah An-Nur 24.4 talks about the punishment for false accusations if you can't provide 4 witnesses.
Yeah, that's a whole other dimension to it. Okay, so you tried to address this within the community, right? But you said you faced resistance, you even got asked to leave the masjid. What do you think that says about things?
Yeah, it raises some concerns about how the community is responding here, The resistance you faced, it suggests there might be fear of exposure, some power dynamics at play, or even just prioritizing cultural norms over Islamic principles.
Yeah, that prioritizing cultural norms thing is a big one. Like people will say, oh, well, this is just how we do things here, but that doesn't make it right.
Exactly. And this is particularly troubling because in Islam, marriage, nikah, is considered a mithaq galis. It's a solemn covenant, a really serious commitment. Surah An-Nisa 4.21 emphasizes that. And the masjid, it should be a place where justice is upheld and people are supported. But when they said the masjid has nothing to do with your marriage, well, that really goes against the idea of community support that's emphasized in the hadith. Like in Sunan Ibn Majah 1895, it advises announcing marriages publicly in the mosque. It's about transparency and community involvement.
Yeah, it's almost like they're washing their hands of it and saying it's a private matter when it clearly has implications for the whole community.
Exactly, exactly. And what's particularly concerning is the example this sets for young Muslims. They see these things happening, and it can really shake their faith.
Absolutely. If leaders in the community aren't upholding Islamic principles, what message does that send? It risks normalizing this kind of injustice and leads to, a very superficial understanding of faith.
Right, right. And it can be really disillusioning. And You mentioned your concern about your wife possibly using her Islamic knowledge to manipulate the situation. That, coupled with the lack of empathy you described, it points to some really troubling behavior. But at the end of the day, the core fact remains. This second nikah is batil, it's invalid, and it constitutes public zina.
And obviously this has all had a huge impact on you personally.
Of course. The pain, the betrayal, the sleeplessness, the feeling of being shut out, these are all very natural responses to such a deeply unjust situation. Remember, Allah knows your pain, hardship is a test of faith, and it requires sober patience. Surah Ashar 94.6 and Surah Al-Ankabut 29.2 remind us of that.
So what's the key takeaway here?
The core takeaway is that this situation involves some really serious violations of Islamic law and ethical principles. And it all comes back to the sanctity of marriage and the absolute need for communal responsibility and accountability. These are not small things.
Right. So for you listening, you navigate this really tough time, think about how important it is to keep seeking knowledge, to deepen your understanding of Islam. That's how you can navigate these complex situations and really uphold justice in your community, even when it's hard, even when you face resistance. Think about the role you can play in pushing for transparency and demanding accountability, because that's how we protect the well-being of the whole community. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.